I want to thank you all for coming out. I'm Margaret Matheson. I'm the owner of Phoenix Art Supplies. And this is my framer, Jenny Schaeffer. She has 32 years of framing experience, which is what qualifies her to talk to you tonight.
Okay, hi. So yes, I'm Jenny Schaeffer, and started doing picture framing right out of high school and found it was something I had a passion for and really loved. And I've been working with artists, photographers, and just the general public for a long time now. And lately I've been seeing more and more photography coming into the stores as the digital age moved in. We see more and more people that were maybe hobbyists kind of moving into becoming an enthusiast and really wanting to better their photography and better their presentation of photography. But also we see a lot of people just taking pictures for their homes and wanting to decorate with photography rather than paintings. So there's a lot of different levels I'm going to be talking about and covering tonight, from the most affordable type of framing that you can do to get into shows, or say you're a photographer and you want to display at a festival or something, and it gets expensive for people to custom frame all of their photography. So there are different options that I'm going to talk about that we can help you with, just to maximize that, but to make it look as nice as possible. And then kind of moving into, if you're trying to get into a very nice show and you really want to showcase your photography, or if you're a studio photographer, how do you display your work to show people that you can do more than just a black frame on a photograph? There's a lot more available. We have over 2,000 choices here at the shop, and I try to work with people individually with their photographs and their paintings, and this kind of works with all print medium pretty much. I mean, the things we're going to discuss tonight would work with any type of print medium. So I'm going to just start with, okay, so if you are really trying to be affordable, you take a photograph, you decide to print it in a standard size, say an 8x10. So here's an 8x10 photograph. This is by Don Schoenlaber. This is printed upside down here as an 8x10. And so that makes it easy, right? You just go to the store and get a standard size frame, so an 11x14 that already has a mat cut with an 8x10 opening. The problems that arise when you do that, though, even though it's standard, it's an 8x10 going into an 11x14. That's about what you get. But the other problem arises, I'm going to come forward, is so now you've put it on a little thicker backing board. How do you close it up? And this happens a lot with people trying to get into art shows. They get these frames because they're affordable, and they're like, well, I can't close it up, and it says it has to be wired. Well, how do you wire that? You can't close it up because these little tabs don't fit into this plastic backing, and there's nowhere to put wire. They're expecting you to hang it on this. So as an affordable solution, it's not a really good solution unless you're getting like a wooden frame. If you get a wooden frame, I can work with you. I can put it together. I can wire it. And the other thing I can do to help you out a little bit is, say you give me an 11x14 frame that's wooden that I can work with, and we change the temperature of the mat, because there's a million white mats you can work with. And this one just came with the frame. But by putting a little bit warmer white mat on it, it can dress it up and just kind of look more fitting and a little bit more custom, a little nicer. That helps a little bit with the temperature of the mat. And if you're doing a wooden frame, then I can close it up for you, or you can do it yourself. And things we do to help photographers with doing this type of work, I can cut the mat, or we can sell you a piece of mat board, but you can choose between hundreds and hundreds of white mat boards that are not just, the average white, but the white that goes with the piece that you're working on.
This is the board that was cut here?
Yeah. So this is just one that I cut upstairs. The other one came with the frame. So that's one thing that we can do with you. And also, I wanted to bring up just an affordable way to display your pieces. A lot of people that are doing art shows will just have them matted with us professionally and then have them put in these bags. We sell these bags. We sell the mat board and the backing board. It's an affordable, very clean way for people to handle the artwork. And this is matted, but you can do it without matting it too, by just cutting it to the size of the printed paper. And this is a very clean, easy way for people to display photography. So say if you're doing a festival or something, this is really a nice way and an affordable way to display photography. I would think that offering a lot of unframed pieces, but then one piece or two pieces that are framed really nicely, shows people how you can frame that really nicely without having to pay for all of that nice framing. And it's a lot better. Like, people can envision that in their home more. It's easier to purchase than something that's framed poorly, because then people tend to not respond to that as well.
So for something like
yes.
That's fair framed.
Yes.
How do you determine what is your process in deciding the thickness of the frame, the space between the frame and the print, and how much matting to put in there?
Well, that's something I work on with people as an individual. You come in and I show you how much space would look good and how much, and I can show you different effects that you can get. That's a real individual taste preference. Here's an example of a frame that I chose to do. Simple photograph, but I chose not to mat it.
Okay.
And this is just a choice because I liked the weight of the frame. Down better.
So then do you start with the frame you want to use first? Do you match the image to the frame and then decide what matting would complement and bring those two together? And
So the question is really, how do you decide when to mat something, when to not mat, how to start this process? Oftentimes, because I've done it for so long, and it depends on why they're framing it. Are you framing it for a show? Are you framing it for an event? Are you framing it for a client? Are you framing it for your own home? These things matter when choosing frames. If you're framing for an art show such as Phillips Mill that's coming up soon, they tend to they want kind of a simple white or neutral mat, and generally a black or dark frame. Something to just kind of keep it very, very simple, because they want to look at the photography. They want to see the photograph as a piece of artwork and not be distracted by the frame. So this probably wouldn't be an appropriate thing to do in that case. But if this is going in your home, you can pick out design elements in the photograph just like you can with a painting. And what I chose to pull out was the metal structure of the bridge and how the bridge is kind of rusted and old and has texture like this, and the angles that this brings out. And so I like the presence that this offers rather than giving it a lot of room around it. I liked the tightness of it. But I mean, that was just a preference. And when a person comes in for framing, I can go through these individual choices with them to help them choose on each piece they bring in. Here's let's see. Oh, that's a Velcro. Okay. So this is another example of something like going into an art show. They chose not to do a white mat at all. Well, it's depicting something that's antique. It's not an antique picture. It's just a reenactor, but the piece is depicting something kind of old. And because of the texture and the kind of old look they wanted, a warmer, old-fashioned looking mat, not so modern, not so clean white, but something a little bit warmer. And again, a very thin black frame, but it's a custom size, and that's the difference. This is custom size just to fit this photograph. So the next step up from getting your own frame at the box store, to me, and this is something that we offer. Okay, so you've got your frame at the box store. We did that, and customizing a matting. But really, this is not in proportion to the frame, to the matting. You know, it's not exactly in proportion. It's a standard size. But if you have a custom mat cut, And we sell these frame kits. They're very inexpensive, but you get a look that's more custom because it fits the size. Let me just pop that in there. Oh, it goes this way. We'll get it in. It's all right. There. So that's something that's a little bit more custom. And it's using, can you see it okay? It's using a black core mat, which gives an extra little line, which kind of draws your eye into the photograph, and a very thin black frame, which is more proportionate to the picture. So this, to me, would be a very appropriate type of framing for a contest, Phillips Mill, or even like an arts festival or something where you're just hanging a lot of them. You want the same look over and over again. This is a really clean, simple way to do it, and it's very affordable. So it's not as customized, but it's very appropriate. If you want to step it up from there, and you're framing something, say, for a client or for your own home, you can get into something like this. And this probably wouldn't be as appropriate for a competition because it's adding design elements to the framing. This is a linen mat, and it's a double mat, and the frame has a lot of texture to it and a little bit of shininess, which kind of reflects in the train and the smoke and the things. So there are elements in the photograph that I'm pulling out that kind of are reflected in this frame choice. But it's a little bit more personal. It's not as generic. So a photographer might choose this to present to a client or in their own home. So that's a third choice for this one. And it's the one that's going in my home because it's my picture that I bought. So those are 3 levels of choices there. And that works pretty well with, if you're a photographer and you're printing up something that's a standard size. Those are some ideas for that. But what if you decide not to crop into a standard size? Then what you're left with is something like this. So here's a lovely photograph, but the closest standard size we could get is an 11 by 17. So that doesn't really work. You know, that's very cropped. And unless you want to compromise your composition, it doesn't really work. And I do this over and over again. And I see it even for shows, people putting things like this into 16 by 20s, and it doesn't really work. So just by customizing your mat choice, it's much nicer. It fits the size of the piece. And I would just go with a very simple frame. You could go with that black metal. I would probably choose something like this. Something textural, something that kind of works with the lines in the picture, that fits the idea of a farm. So there's like a barn feeling, a barnwood type feeling about this. And it's very simple, and this would be appropriate for any situation. So I think that kind of a choice, I mean, it shows, you know, that you've put some thought into your photograph. And I think that's kind of important. As we look at photography as an art form, you have to look at your photographs like, how important are they to you? How do you want them viewed from people? Is it something that you just put into a standard frame, or do you want to draw out elements of your photograph to accentuate and really bring it all together as a piece of art, not just a snapshot? So from that level, you can get into more complicated things. But so if you're a studio photographer and you have a studio and you want to photograph people and you want to make it look alluring and, oh, this is the end product, this is a really great photograph. I don't know if can you see it with the lighting? Is it okay? Ed Dugert is the photographer. And he has this in his studio. And by just eliminating all the white, it just makes you look at the subject matter. And this is got museum glass on it, and that's another thing that we can talk about, the type of glazing that people use on their photographs. With digital photography today, we don't really know what the longevity of the inks are. They say they're archival inks and they're supposed to last, but by using a UV filtered glass, we have more assurance of them lasting longer, being true to their color and not losing color. there's two different reasons to use something like museum glass. Museum glass is 99% UV filtered, but it's also very clear. Now you'll see like a bluish green kind of haze on it in the light, but it's a lot less reflective than a regular glass or conservation clear glass, which has the shininess. Well, I'll show you. Yes, go ahead. No, please.
So is there a non-reflective UV glass?
That's what this is. Well, it's reflective, but I would never use non-reflective glass. It makes things fuzzy and it really loses detail. You can use it. I don't recommend it. It's etched. And so it has a diffusion quality to it. And unless you're using it against your photograph, I would never use it. And the reason I don't use it against your photograph or any glass against photography is because moisture and mold can build up because glass condensates. So you need some kind of barrier in between your glazing product and your background, and that's why we use mats or glass spacers. And in that case, I used a glass spacer. And if you're using a glass spacer with etched glass, you're really going to lose clarity. So that's why I prefer this. There's also one called AR glass, which is 75% UV filtered, but it's also has this kind of clear quality to it.
That one's called museum.
Yeah, it's quite expensive. It's worth it sometimes. I mean, it's up to you when it's appropriate or not. If there is a light situation, a very high light situation, I think it's preferable, but it's expensive.
If you don't want your prints to turn green or magenta
yes,
in about 9 months,
exactly. It's preferable, right? However, on this piece, I have just the 99% UV clear. So it's not the museum glass. And if you see the reflection, it'll be a white light reflection instead of that shaded green, darker reflection. But it works quite well in keeping your prints protected from UV rays. And those things are important in prolonging our artwork as photographers. It's important. This one also has the museum glass on it. This kind of brings me to the next level of framing these photographs. So that would be great for a studio piece, but this is also a studio piece. This is a portrait, but it's very different from this portrait. This is a very modern, sleek, kind of sexy portrait. This is very traditional. This is done by Paula Chambly, and her pieces are kind of timeless. And this is a piece I got from her, and she was like, frame it like a Rembrandt, because that's how she feels about her artwork. So I did. And this is not using it's a black and white photograph, but I'm using a color matte on it. And it really goes into a home decor. It's a situation where this is for someone's home. This is a special treasure for someone's home. It's not just a piece of artwork to me. It's very personal. And kind of repeating this color, this gray color, kind of draws your eye into that portrait. So that's, yeah, go ahead.
Was the image printed that size?
Yes, it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that confuses people sometimes with photography. And it's a hard question for photographers, whether to leave the white border around or not. Because when you leave the white border around, people are sure to know that that is where the crop is. And that's why a lot of people do it that way. But as a framer, I like being able to not have that white show. In many cases, especially something like this, that white would be very distracting to show. And even in this one, he signed it in the white, but I just opted out. I didn't want it to show. So that's a choice that photographers have to make. And also it's a choice where they sign their pieces. And really, I just discourage any photographers from signing on the mat, because mats are meant to be replaced. I mean, over time, you might just trash them. And so many times people come in to reframe the photographs they've bought, and they're like, but he signed the mat. So I usually cut it out and put it on the back to preserve the signature. But it's really meaningless, unless it's with the piece. So that's a question a lot of photographers have to ask themselves about their choices when signing. Some other ways to frame photography, or other things I'd like to think about, is like when you're dealing with color photography, white is not always a very good option at all. And this one by Josh Woodruff, we used a neutral but it's really the neutral that's like in the background of all the whole picture. And so it's still a neutral. It's just the color that kind of seems to be behind everything. And that works well also with antique photography and old photographs of people. Just using the color that's behind everything. It doesn't distract. It kind of just extends your vision of that piece. This is a decorative element called a fillet. We put these in more decorative pieces for the home.
Cut the mat.
A reverse. And you build a little piece of wood inside. It's like a second frame, but it sometimes ties in the outer frame. This is really, very decorative. This wouldn't be really appropriate for a show necessarily unless you're having your own art show and you're featuring it as a centerpiece and then framing things around it. But it's really going with home decor. And that makes it a piece that could go above someone's couch or something, but really kind of pulls together your home decor and features a photograph rather than a piece of artwork or a print. So that's kind of a nice way to display photography. Another sample of when white and black are maybe not the best choice. I just had somebody in, and this is a photograph by Dawn Schoenlaber, and she came in to get a simple white mat and black frame, and that's what she wanted. Simple white frame, white mat, black frame. And I was like, okay, and we laid it down, and there's no black or white in this photograph other than the border. So I said, well, let's just try this mat since we have all these mats to choose from, not just black and white. And so she's like, oh, I really like that one. And we tried the black frame on, but there's no black in here at all. And this is for her home. Why do you need to go black and white if it's for your home? But people do. Pardon?
So it was intended to be green?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. The painting, this photograph is not a black and white photograph. It's a color photograph, and that was the color that he developed it. It's the mist. And by choosing this frame, it just accentuates the color that's already in there without having to do black and white. But people that come in for custom framing, it's a funny phenomenon because they go, well, I just want a simple black frame and a white mat because that's how all my artwork's framed. I said, well, why? Well, I bought it at an art show and that's how it was framed. So who has the burden of framing it correctly or framing it the best it could be? Is it the artist or the person buying the artwork? Oftentimes the artist will frame it in these frames from the box stores because it's affordable. And frankly, none of us make enough money at our art. We just don't. So it's hard to price them at the place that you would need to frame them all like this. It would outprice them a lot of times. So people come in and they're like, well, I just want a black and white frame. But then I show them this and I'm like, oh, well, that's really beautiful. That's not what I intended. I was like, well, why would you choose black and white? Because everything else is. So I'm trying to get people's mindset away from just choosing black and white because that's what goes into the art shows and that's how they buy them. But decorating with your photography, not just hanging them on the wall as a photograph, but decorating with photography. There's some other choices. If you're not printing on paper, but you're printing as a canvas, that's become a very popular choice. This is kind of a neat way to display something printed on canvas. This is just a photograph that somebody took on vacation, but they had it printed on canvas. And it was like ready to hang, And they got it, and they're like, well, that's not really attractive just by itself, ready to hang. So they came in for framing. And this is a floating frame, and it just kind of gives a little accentuation to that deep canvas. But it gives you, it's also nice because you don't need glass on it. It's been treated, so it doesn't need glass, so you don't have the glare situation. And it's just kind of a fun, different way to present photography. Also, people are printing on plastic now, printing on metal, and they're doing similar things. You can still frame those if you choose to. You don't have to, but you can frame them in things like this, floating frames.
What is floating frames?
Floating frames is there's no lip covering the edge of this. The artwork itself is floating inside the box that we're creating. And there's very simple choices, or there's some decorative choices, more simple. Oh, yeah, there's a sample of it. Pop it in. So this is another interesting choice. And that'll bring me to something else too. There's different ways to adhere your photograph to the backing board. Some people choose to dry mount. That's usually spray mounting. They do it. For fine art photography, I would never recommend this, but for people's homes and stuff, some people do it. It's not removable. It's not archival. It can yellow your photograph over time, but it's really flat. So people that really want flat, that's a choice that they often make. There was someone putting some stuff in Phillips Mill, and he brings me in his frames, and he'll change out the frames sometimes. And I do that too. Like if you have an old frame that doesn't have to be from a box store, it could be a nice frame, but you just want to change out your photograph and remat it to kind of customize it. Well, I do that for one of my customers, and he brought them in. He goes, well, just reuse the backing, put the new photograph in, put it in, remat it. Okay. Well, I take it apart. The photograph's been dry mounted. I didn't do the work, but I'm like, so I can't reuse it. But if you do it the way I do it, this is how I do it. I use an archival backing board. It's a foam core. And I use these clear little acrylic corners, which can be popped right off. You can replace them really quickly and easily. And that's a really nice way to have your pieces just, be completely, perfectly archival. So if you ever wanted to take them out or change them out, that's a really easy way to do it. We sell the backing board. We sell the corners if you want to do it yourself, or I can do it for you.
So when you say dry mount, you really mean spray mount?
Spray mounting or heat mounting. People heat mount, dry mount. They do. You don't know what you're going to get. Right, but I've seen it. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. So it's not how I would recommend, but it's how people do it. But this is a photograph that we purchased at our art show here, which every summer we do something called 40 Art. If you don't know about it, it's kind of a fun thing. We take in artwork anonymously, and we sell it all for $40, and it's all 5x7 pieces. So we bought this one. We didn't know who the photographer was, and it ends up being Robert Woodruff, Josh's father, who's a plug for Josh. He's filming me right now doing from Pixelmite upstairs, the web designer. And anyway, his father took this photograph. And we really liked it and purchased it. And this has been mounted, but we decided to float mount it inside the frame with a very deep float. And the matting's way in the back, and it kind of adds to the architectural structure of the photograph. And using the blue and enhancing that blue color kind of adds to that too. So that's just a fun, different way. No, please, bring on the questions. It's good.
So I noticed that there isn't much space between the photograph or what's being float mounted and these floating frames.
That's correct.
Is that a thing? Or
that is. It's.
Would you want to perhaps put that image in a floating frame that's a little larger so it becomes a little bit more...
You can. That's a choice. With this type of framing, it's an aesthetic choice. Okay. With this one, it's an aesthetic choice. With the floating frames, it's really not. They give you about 1.5 to 2 inches of space that you can show around it, but really when you show too much space around it, it gets lost in there a little bit. It's not really meant to be that way. Mm-hmm. And where did I put that sample?
Well, I noticed this little piece. I know it's not a photograph, but this is
a
floated effect, and there's more room.
Right.
Watch again. It's not a photograph, but there's
a floating feeling.
It doesn't
and there is more
so squeezed into a box.
Right. Well, in this little situation, we decided to make it a box. Okay. And it really is all the same color, so there's no design element that's not the same color. And so if you use different color, we probably want to give it more space and more room too. Okay. But because it's done this way, it just is, they're like little treasures this way, and that's why we kind of kept it very small. And really, when I'm designing, I oftentimes will just lay it out and then move it back and try to visualize it that way and move it forward until my eye feels right. This one we left so much room, more room than most people are comfortable with. And even offsetting the space is sometimes uncomfortable for people, but to me it's very classic.
No,
There's a lot more space here than there is up here.
Yes,
and
that's
it's more,
optical center.
Yeah, it is. But framing has changed over the years. When I started, you always bottom weighted things. That was the standard. It's not anymore. Modern framing is much more about centering everything, and I don't know why, but that's the trend. And so it's really, this becomes more odd to people, and I like using that a lot. And if you're going into a frame that's not, you're not custom making that frame, but you're going into it. If you're doing a vertical image opening, I tend to bottom weight quite a bit. But if you're doing it horizontal and it doesn't quite fit, bottom weighting doesn't work as well. So those are just things that I've learned visually over the years in framing. And it really is a choice. It's really, I might have suggestions, but not, we all have our tastes. So, yes.
Is there a proportion when you bottom weight, or is it just a subjective judgment?
It is subjective, but I tend to, I don't think there's an absolute rule. Maybe there is an absolute rule, but I don't use it. I'm a visual person, so I have to visualize. And I've got a great computer back over here, so I can move my little thing around till it seems right to me. It's probably like the 2/3 up kind of rule, but really to me it's about visualization. And that's why whenever I'm designing for people, I lay everything out on the table and I say, well, move the frame to where it looks good to you. And then I tend to move it back a little bit because I think people do make it a little tight. But not everybody's used to like 4-inch mats and, bigger mats. They still, and it's something odd about this area too. This area is really traditional. And so people tend to like things that are smaller. They have older homes, except there's the big McMansions, but people like smaller things. And I find in framing, people tend to like smaller things here. So it's just this area. So I don't know. Let's see if there's anything else that I haven't covered or any other questions that anyone might have about custom framing photography. No? I've covered a lot of ground.
So if I wanted to float a 4x6 print in that, that could work technically, right?
Of course.
Okay.
And then you could just
see if it works.
Make that space bigger. Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever works for the space that you're working into. So just to recap, the things that we can offer you for custom framers. We can customize mats for you, or you could come and choose from one of our many mats and cut it yourself. We can back it and put it in a bag for you, or we can, help you do a frame kit that we have here. We have them to offer. You can put them together yourself, or we can do it. I just want to get rid of the fears people have from walking into a custom frame shop thinking, oh my God, it's so expensive, I can't custom frame anything. We're here to help you present your artwork as best as possible for whatever your needs are. And we can do that on any of those levels. And we do offer discounts to the profession, and we offer discounts on multiple pieces. And that's on an individual basis that I can talk to you all about. But so those are things that we offer here. And I just hope that, use us any way you need to. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
For a photograph, you're using the corners.
Yes.
On the board. If you're doing a mat on top of that,
yes.
you attach that mat, or you just light it on top?
You can, but frankly, if it's done properly and cut to size, you don't necessarily need to, because whenever you're stapling in the back, the pressure kind of keeps it in place. If it's really tight, you might need a little bit of double-face tape, but I only use a little at the top. You really shouldn't need to tape it all in. I was trying to take apart something that was taped all in today, and that's really difficult because you might rip the photograph or rip, the matting trying to get it apart. So I don't feel the need to glue it all down and attach it all. It's the pressure usually holds it in pretty well. Yes, sure.
Do you sell pre-cut mats here?
We don't need to. We'll customize them for you. And frankly, I could cut them while you wait. I have a frame shop upstairs, and I have hundreds of mat choices up there. And if you need something right there on the spot, just come upstairs with me. We'll measure it out customize that color, and cut it for you while you wait. So that's better than having pre-cut mats. Yeah.
Have you ever seen people that sign photographs? onto the print rather than off?
I prefer it. Yeah, that's what I have seen that. What do you use to sign a photograph?
Yeah.
A lot of people use micron pens. They're a permanent ink and they dry really quickly and don't smear so well, so it's a nice way to sign. That's what I think most. I'm not a photographer myself. I'm a fine artist, but that's what most of my photography clients have used, and we sell them here. So, yes. Okay. So, do any of you why did you come here tonight? Did I help address some of the issues of things that you?
Yes.
What were some of the questions you might have
I
had?
was wondering, well, I didn't really know what you were going to say,
Mhm.
but when you were talking, I had in the past tried to put maybe different photographs in with a matting on it, not necessarily with a frame,
Right.
but not necessarily 8x10.
Right.
12.
And then
So
how does that work?
Right. How does that work? So what you said tonight works
Oh,
perfectly
good.
for me.
Good. I'm glad. Anybody else? Yes?
I'm actually submitting the first role
Uh-huh.
first time this year,
Yes.
so I came to get a little
Heads up on how to.
frame,
And I hope I helped you there, but frankly, if you bring your photograph in, I can give you one-on-one more advice about your photograph and the best choices that you can make and what works in your budget. So, sure.
I found it interesting because I never really, if you enter into a show, you say, do you make it showy or do you not? It seems like probably different shows have a different
I think so.
general attitude to it.
I think different shows do have a different attitude toward how you frame things. What I've witnessed at shows, very sophisticated shows, is they just want a simplicity because they really want your artwork to be the focal point, not the framing. And that can sometimes be a distraction for someone that's judging a photograph. Mm-hmm. That would be fun. Right. Then anything goes. Right. And that becomes more personality that you're trying to enter. Yeah. I have heard from judges that are judging shows that it's very hard to judge when a photograph or a painting is a very nice painting or photograph, but the matting has been cut by hand and you can see the sloppiness of it because no matter what, it's hard to cut a perfect straight line and you can see that. People don't always.
Do you use a pusher or a pullback cutter?
I use the Wizard, which is a CAD program, automated mat cutter, and I program everything in, and it's so precise. And I've been trained on a pull mat cutter. That's what I used before the Wizard existed. I've done, yes.
What we're saying is that the presentation that you have for your piece, whether it's for a show or for your home, is to show your professionalism and to show
that you care.
Your work.
Right.
Your work isn't done when you have a photograph. It's how you present the entire thing, and having that for a cut on a frame that's not really proportionate says something about you and how you
value your work. Yeah.
And the judges, whether it's conscious or unconscious, feel that.
Right.
I guess that's the other issue about you don't know if you're buying, if you're not a seller, but you're a buyer, if you buy a photograph. You don't really know how it was handled.
I see a lot of it afterwards because people come in and they'll discuss it with me often. Can I salvage this frame? I really don't like this mat. How was it put together? Or I redesign everything. And it's really funny because I reframe a lot of people's work, whether it be paintings or photography. One of the things that makes me laugh the most is painters that put the big, big gold frames on everything. Well, I reframe those all the time. I have tons of those big gold frames like in the back room because they don't want them. And painters spend so much money on these big gold frames because it's glitzy and shiny and looks good in the shop windows. And some galleries require like something, and that's not what people put in their homes. So same thing with photography. People are learning that photography is artwork and they want it in their homes to decorate their homes, and it speaks to them, but the black and white doesn't always work for them, so they know that, oftentimes they'll be coming and reframing it. So I know some of you use my services already, and I thank you for all that, and thank you for your time and listening. Yes, surely.
The quality of the print material that can choose the different papers and the degree of gloss on the.
Of course.
Do you have a preference from the point of glazing, for instance? Does it become too reflective? Is it too much if you have a glossy?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so, really. I mean, the less glossy your glass is, the more clearly you're going to see any artwork, regardless of it being a photograph or a three-dimensional piece of artwork or a painting or whatever, the less reflective and that's why museum glass is used on museum pieces, because you can see so clearly through it. But it's pricey and it's not always worth the price. So you have to, as a consumer too, decide when that's going to be appropriate for you or not. But glossy or flat, I haven't seen it matter so much with how it affects the framing.
So what's the price different ratio than regular
Right.
glass? Is museum glass 3 times more?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So this piece, I think this piece of glass is about $200 or so. $250 would be like $50. Yeah, not even regular. Not even conservation. Conservation good glass is only $50. Conservation glass is only about $5 to $10 more than regular glass. It's 99% UV, but just not reflection free. It's what's on here. Conservation. That's correct. That's correct. It has a coating on it that's less reflective. So, yeah, that costs a lot of money. Yeah. It is quite a difference. Yeah, there's usually fingerprints.
When you look at it here, the difference doesn't seem that much.
Well, when the regular glass, because he actually had it reglazed because he got it home and realized he couldn't see it because it was all black. And so seeing this one is kind of a harder example because it's so dark, but you couldn't see it at all. With the regular glass, it was so reflective. So
probably
by
getting a lot
putting
of
museum
reflection
glass,
off that black print too.
yeah,
Right.
black on black is very reflective. But it's also on this. This one's also has museum glass. And it lowers the amount of reflection. This one does also. We use it a lot on our samples because, we want to show the best we can.
Yeah, but it really is noticeable when it's just juxtaposed with.
But of course, yeah. I don't want to pass this one around because it doesn't belong to me, but this one has the regular, the shiny glass, but it's UV filtered. He signs it on the white down below.
So that is the actual part of the photograph?
That's correct. That's the white border around the photograph. Don, I've been framing Don Schoenleber's work for quite a long time now through different things that I've been working with, but he always signs on the white. Where Josh Woodruff signs within this border, and he just uses a silver pen, and there's like a little mark on the bottom. You can hardly see it, but it's there. It's his mark. So people sign in different places, and some people don't choose to sign. They don't want to see a signature on their pieces. So, it's all what your choices
sign
are.
on the back.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Often on the back of the photograph itself. Yeah. Because it's always with it, so you can document it that way.
It's tough to do with some papers.
The corners,
Mm-hmm.
when you're framing and matting that, you don't see those corners at all?
No, they hide underneath the matting. Yeah, so they only cover about 1/4 of an inch. That's kind of something important too. If you're printing a photograph, it's nice to leave a little bit of an extra border around it so that these corners can be used. Otherwise, I'm trimming them down real small. Or you can actually use a linen hinging tape, which is the old-fashioned way before these corners existed, which goes underneath and then tapes on here. But then you have a tape that is touching your artwork. Mm-hmm. So it can come off, it's removable with effort, or you slice it off and you always have a tape mark on the back of your piece. And that happens with old photography a lot, you see that? But since the invention of these corners, it just makes life a lot easier. I had the privilege of framing an original Ansel Adams not too long ago, and that was really...
Did you shake?
I did. It was beautiful. And apparently, so he printed in 8x10 format and glued them onto a board. That's how things were done. So we just matched that paper, that archival paper that he glued it to, and it was just creamy and warm and beautiful, and this kind of, similar to this, kind of a gray, terminal frame, but it was really, really beautiful, and it was
fiber paper.
Yeah, it was really an honor to to do it. So, well, I want to thank you all for coming out, and if you have any other questions, even afterwards, you're welcome to come up and
Thank you.
okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.